Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Licensing Committee. In order to assist in the process this evening, I must ask everyone to ensure that their mobile phones are either switched off or on silent mode. We would be grateful if you would remain quiet whilst the meeting is in progress. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be filmed by the Council and broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. If you are seated in the chamber, it is possible that the cameras will capture your image. By your presence, you are deemed to consent to this to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. As the acting chairman of this meeting, I can, at my discretion, terminate or suspend filming if, in my opinion, continuing to do so will prejudice the proceedings of the meeting, or if I consider that the continued filming might infringe the rights of any individual or breach any statutory provisions. Finally, there are no planned fire drills for this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate immediately via the emergency exits. Thank you. All right. First agenda item is election of chairman. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. It gives me great pleasure to propose Councillor Paul Hilliard as chairman for the remainder of this municipal year.
Thank you. And do I have a second?
Happy to second that.
Thank you. If we can take a vote now, all in favour, please. Thank you. Okay, so because of that vote, thank you for your support there. We need a vice chairman. So do we have any proposers for Councillor Phipps?
I'm happy to propose Councillor Neal.
Hang on, Chairman, I was going to second that, but I'll defer.
I will withdraw.
Thank you.
Okay, if we go to a vote for Councillor Fred Neal as vice chairman, please. Okay. Okay, so moving on to next item, apologies for absence, please.
Yes, Chairman, I have apologies from Councillors Bath and Jameson.
Thank you. And declarations of interest, please. No declarations. All right. So moving on to minutes, 3 sets of minutes. So first of all, the minutes of 25th of June, but I imagine not many were actually there at the meeting.
Okay, I'm happy to propose.
And
I'm happy to propose that.
And I'm happy to second those. Thank you. And then the minutes of 11th and of July, similarly.
Again, I'm the only one here, so I'm happy to propose that.
And I second those. Thank you. And then the subcommittee on the 18th and 22nd of 27th of September.
I'll let David do that one.
And all done. Great. Okay. Should be easier next time. And moving on to item 5, review of Hackney carriage fare structure. Mr. Whitney, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if I could draw the committee's attention to page 11, 4 lines up. What is an incidences? I think the word that they're looking for is incidents. So if that, Chairman, I'd be happy.
Well, if we're nitpicking, that same meeting, I noticed that it says there that Councillor Flagg was here twice, both present as chairman and then present in the. If we're nitpicking.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Just by quick way of background, as it says in the report, the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act gives councils the powers to set fares that Hackney carriage drivers charge to members of the public. Those legally only relate to fares that are hailed in the street and are calculated by way of the meter, but most companies do use those to sort of calculate their private hire charges, which don't have to be on those rates, but as I say, many of the companies actually use those as the basis. At the last meeting, it was agreed to advertise the new fare structure that had been requested by the trade, and that was agreed, and the proposed fare structure was advertised as legally required, and the consultation responses are reported in Appendix 1. Just to sort of backtrack a bit, the current fares are set out in paragraph 2.3. In paragraph 2.4, we have some of the neighbouring authorities' charges. The trade, if you recall from the last meeting, had asked that the fare structures be aligned with Bournemouth and Poole, and so the proposed structure is set out in paragraph 3.1. As I said, the proposal was advertised and a letter of representation has been received against the increase, and that's set out as Appendix 1. And essentially it is now for members to decide whether you wish to agree the fare increase or whether you wish to modify it or simply leave it as it is. As I say, the recommendation is to approve, but it is for members to make up their own minds on that. So unless there's anything else I can help with, I won't say anything more.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions, please?
Chairman, yes, it's not a question exactly, but I very much take the point of the correspondent, who is anonymous, which is, I find, I mean, why would you be anonymous if you're writing this letter? But still, I very much take the point that we always fall in line with Bournemouth and Poole, whereas they don't fall in line with us. So I would like to say, why don't they fall in line with us? However, I know that that will be impossible. So I won't go any further with that, but I do take the point of the correspondent. I also don't see why it's anonymous. I mean, Sean, can you help me with that? Why is the person concerned not ready to put their name to it?
I believe it was probably redacted for data protection reasons. I'm not sure why the name has gone, but certainly if there's a personal email in there, then I would expect that to be removed, and any other personal information. But as I say, I can't comment exactly on why. I'm obviously the email that would have come in, or the letter that would have come in. It's an email. It would have had a name in there, so it isn't actually anonymous in that sense, but it is obviously to the committee.
Yes, Sean. There's only one anonymous or redacted appendix respondent. There's nothing there supporting the change. There is only something not supporting the change. So how do you weight that against nothing supporting the change, other than the fact that the association asked originally for it?
Yes, I mean, and I think essentially that's the matter before you in that regard. Traditionally in the past, the trade have requested increases, usually to align with Bournemouth and Poole. So there is that tradition, if I call it that, but there's no obligation clearly on the committee to continue with that. And you could, if you feel that the representation you've received should carry more weight, then you're perfectly entitled to deny the request or to modify it.
it's not a pecuniary interest, but I did take a taxi a few weeks ago from my house. I phoned up and booked a cab, and I was surprised that it cost me £10 something to do 1.5 miles to town. And looking at the figures now, I didn't at the time I took the cab, but I realised that it looks to me that the day rate, because it was just after lunch, 1:30 time, so one would have assumed it would have been already on day rate. But the rate, £10 something, was nearer the Christmas Day rate. So is there any information about how the meters can be turned on or off of specific rates?
I'm not 100% certain of how the meters change between the different tariffs. I would imagine it's down to the press of a button to scroll through, in the same way as it is to add extras, cases and passengers and things like that. But of course, as I said in the beginning, the rates that are charged for what are effectively pre-booked journeys or private hire journeys, whilst they are often based upon the Hackney carriage tariffs, there isn't a requirement. It is a private contract between the individuals. It would perhaps be something that would be worth taking up with whichever company sort of provided the journey to perhaps seek clarification of what may have happened in that regard.
We are in Christchurch, and there is virtually only one company who's taken over all the little companies. So I think I don't need to name them. I'm a little bit concerned about how the meters are tariffed and how they get tariffed. And I'm also, I wasn't aware for a long time that when you phone for a taxi, you're actually making a booking. And you should ask, which I failed to do, you should ask, how much is that going to cost me? And you've got a contract between that if you agree and if you don't agree. And I'm sure a lot of our public don't realise that when they call a taxi to their house, they get in and they pay what's on the meter. And I'm sure they don't realise that that is not the contract. So I think we could do some more publicity on that side.
Sure, and to that point, so you explained before the difference between private hire and taxi. Is it that if you hail the vehicle from the street, it's a taxi and we're paying these rates, but if you ring up?
Yes, essentially, if you hail it in the street, or if you get into one on one of the taxi ranks, then that's effectively being hailed in the street. And yes, they must then charge the rates that you set. If you phone up and sort of effectively pre-book a journey, then it is private hire. It's a different regime, and as I said, whilst they tend to base the charges on those, there's nothing to stop you asking, whether or not they can agree a different rate for that particular journey.
Probably it's a little bit of a knowledge thing, but the person in the letter, if they've rung up to go to the hospital, then they could, in theory, agree a rate, and it would just be the return journey more expensive.
Yes, that's correct. So probably in both journeys, they're actually pre-booking, unless they actually walk to a taxi rank or hail one in the street. Then again, it would be a pre-booked journey back home again as well, and they could agree a rate with the company at the outset.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not a question particularly, it's a small point of information. This morning I used a taxi to get home, having taken my car into the garage, and about for 1.5 miles I was charged £6.70, and looking at this, that's exactly what I should have been charged. So, but it was not one of the big company taxes. I think, Chairman, the report is very comprehensive, and I would like to speak on it, but I think we should thank the officer for the work that's gone into this.
Thank you. And obviously, it probably needs not to be said, but come May, we'll a line anyway to make the job of licensing a lot simpler. So it's just bringing it forward to an extent.
Yes, I mean it gets a little bit more complicated because there are some legal requirements relating to zoning when councils amalgamate and go from 3 to 1, but those are subject to discussion at the moment. But certainly the legal advice at the moment is that we would maintain 3 zones for a period of time. That's not to say that those 3 zones wouldn't be aligned in fees, but effectively they would stay 3 separate zones. But that's probably a discussion for a different forum than this one at the moment.
So Phipps?
So what you're saying is we could basically leave these prices as they are for Christchurch residents at the moment if we wanted to, because then in effect this would I suppose get deferred until to the new authority to deal with. Is that the situation?
Yes, essentially tonight you could decide not to agree to an increase. That's perfectly within your remit to do that.
Kerry?
Back on that. Okay, that's great, because I should have just added that. I mean, what it says in this letter, this little bit, is that actually, if the rise will not be reflected, the increase in what the customer gets for their money. I mean, what else are they going to get? They're not going to get anything else except an increase just because Bournemouth and Poole charge that amount. Oh, Christchurch would better do the same. And it worries me a little bit that that's the only reason that we're even considering it at this time, when we could defer it to actually take its course when the new authority is formed.
Point noted again. Can we move on to discussion if there's no more questions?
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, I thought it was Councillor Dedman.
You did
I'm
say
willing to be disabused of that
Ladies
notion.
first.
Was it Councillor Dedman or Councillor Jones? Well, thank you, Councillor Jones, giving way to Councillor Dedman here. I would like to propose that we do nothing until we amalgamate with Bournemouth, and then we will sort it out, which is what the councillor next to me is basically saying. I don't see any point in doing this. It'll be 6 months and then we'll have to do it.
Councillor Jones got in there
Sorry.
first.
I give way to Councillor Phipps. I know my place.
Yeah. I was just going to second it.
Thank you, Chairman. There is a serious point in here. One of the many misdirections that has come about during the last 3 years is that we're all one wonderful urban conurbation, and of course we're not, because over 2/3 of Christchurch is rural. In the urban area across the river, there are frequent bus services to here, there and everywhere. In my county division, we have a sort of half a bus service that rolls along every now and again when it feels like it. If you're an elderly lady or an elderly gentleman, or even somebody who's chronically ill, and you have to get to Bournemouth Hospital, and you're given a specific time, you can seek hospital transport, but again, I am told by somebody who's been in this position, it is very difficult, very complicated, and it doesn't always work. So you're stuck with the problem of getting a taxi. Now, in the urban area, the taxis can't put the fares up too much because there's competition. Out here, there isn't any. Chairman, I'm very pleased. I think that is a very sound proposition by Councillor Dedman and Councillor Mrs. Phipps, and I am very pleased to support it.
Thank you. Any more to speak on this item? Okay, we'll go to a vote then. So to defer, so no increases until April 1st.
Is it appropriate that we defer, because in theory we should only defer to the next meeting, or to refuse? So I think we should just refuse the application, not defer.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to go with that. Refuse the. Okay.
No, I was going to say that because we don't know on April the 1st whether the licensing committee of the new unitary will be able to sit and actually sort it out. So we can't really put a date on it.
Thank you, Sean.
That is unanimous.
Yeah, unanimous decision.
That's very good.
Okay, move on to item 6, representations of outside bodies. Now this is the Councillor Davies going to Dorset Community Safety Partnership. It was just that one. Was there any observations on that report, Councillor Neil?
Yes, I was. I mean, I see the new import of the PCSI role, where unfortunately there's no reference to Christchurch on page 33. It does say 31 PCSIs have been selected, allocated 6 West Dorset, 6 East Dorset and North Dorset, 10 Poole and Purbeck, 7 for Bournemouth, but nothing mentioned about Christchurch as such. We are very short of PCSOs in Christchurch. In fact, my own section of West Christchurch has one PCSO covering virtually from town all the way up to Burton. St Catherine's, Jumpers, Portfield, and they're under an awful lot of pressure. So I think that it really should have someone should have brought something up about that, but this is only for noting, so it's not a recommendation.
I take your point, and this meeting was in June, so do you think there's been people resigned or illnesses, or just general?
Currently the situation is there's been no movement in the recent 3 months.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. There is another outside body report. I represent this council on the Dorset Health Scrutiny Committee. There was a meeting on Wednesday of this week. Unfortunately, the computer thing from my diary said it was at 10 o'clock. I rolled up to find that it had been shifted to 2 o'clock because of the cabinet, and I wasn't able to attend on the afternoon. However, I can say that the purpose of that meeting was to consider a proposition that had been brought forward by the committee, that the proposed merger or takeover by Bournemouth Hospital of the Poole Hospital and most of its important services should be referred to the Secretary of State under the powers which a Health Scrutiny Committee has. This was strongly resisted by the Health Authority, but members will be very pleased to know that by one vote the committee decided to refer the matter to the Secretary of State. So no further progress may be made on that merger until the Secretary of State decides. It will be open to this council and other authorities to submit their comments and to individuals to the Secretary of State. And again, the point was made very, very clearly that for somebody in Swanage who has a heart attack and needs absolutely desperate emergency treatment. The proposal said it is about half an hour from Swanage to Poole. This may be true at midnight in the winter, but it is not the, I'm sorry I'm so boring. It was true in the, not true in the summer. And indeed we have evidence this was the basis of a judicial review challenge by people in Swanage to this decision. Unfortunately, again, I think on a technicality, the JR failed, but the committee does have the right to refer to the Secretary of State. So we have done. What good it will do, I do not know, but it's been done. And again, it's, I think, something that this council might wish to support, but we will take that forward at the appropriate time with the consent of Madam Mayor.
So just on that point, so that committee you're referring to, is that attended by press, or is it a...
There have been reports in the
Oh,
Dorset
right.
press, but I don't know whether they made it over this end. But yes, the Dorset Echo were there, and there have been reports in the Dorset bit of the Echo.
Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. After that interesting report, could we possibly go back to the Dorset Community Safety Partnership? Because there was one part on that I was very surprised at when I read it at home, and I've just re-looked at it. It's on page 24, 6.3, and it's about the safety work plan, which is partly why we get certain people working in certain areas. Councillor Johnson, who I'm actually not sure, I don't know who Councillor Johnson is, he's not on the committee, he's actually an attendee from DAPTC. He asked why hate crime was included on this work schedule, as the number of hate crimes was very low. It was explained, I'm assuming by the officers, that the low numbers were due to victims' reluctance to report issues and did not represent the reality of hate crime in Dorset. Now, I find that very worrying, in that we could say that about anything that we cared to mention, i.e., oh, well, yes, there's loads of it, but it's not reported. And I think that should be flagged up from our committee to their committee, as we really don't want to know what people are thinking. Oh, well, there's more of it, but it's not reported. I think what we need to do is stick to the facts. And that was one of the things I did note on this, that we're being sent up possibly blind alleys because the number of hate crimes in Dorset is low. That is the fact. To say they're not reported, well, we don't know that, do we? So I don't think that this committee, this panel, should be working in that way. So I'd like to make that point. Thank you.
It's a very fair point, and I think the inspector's coming to scrutiny the next meeting, so he will go through the annual figures, and we'll make that point about the difference between reporting, which you have to take, and this is what they've always said, reporting, that's all they can do. You can't just on hearsay, so point taken. Any more questions, please?
Chairman, just on that point, can I invite, as the acting chairman of scrutiny, if any member wishes to attend and speak, and they will be very welcome to do so.
Invitation. Right, going back to the agenda, so we are there for this evening. Nothing else? No, thank you for your time.